She gradually regains consciousness on the operating table. Sticky sweat covers her body, her heart is pounding furiously, and there's a terrible pain in her lower abdomen. Her eyes are still closed, but she can hear everything happening around her. Doctors are bustling about, surgical instruments clinking, lamps buzzing, and more doctors speaking, but she can't make out the words. She feels a wild weakness and the cold of the operating room. Why hadn't she noticed before how cold it was here? Finally, she opens her eyes. The bright light of the lamp hitting her eyes brings her back to reality, and through her foggy mind, a thought breaks through. That's it. It's all over. This decision was terribly complex. She had thought about it for a long time, doubted the correctness of her choice, berated herself for a long time. But what wouldn't she do for love? Now she feels a mixture of bitterness and relief. She knows that this choice will change her life forever, and she is ready to accept its consequences, whatever they may be. Finally, she snaps out of her thoughts and hears the conversation of two doctors. They stand with their backs to her, starting to tidy themselves up after the surgery and discussing the patient's condition. "Alfred, what will we tell her mother?" one asks. "She lost a lot of blood, but her young body will cope," the other doctor replies. "Well, as for her children, she'll have to forget about them. She held on until the last moment and then changed her mind." "Well, what did she achieve? Only ruined her own life. She should have used protection." "I feel sorry for her. She's so young." "We won't be able to help her. Medicine is powerless here." As soon as the last words reached her ears, her heart stopped, her body froze in shock. There was no strength even to scream in despair. Her fingers tremble slightly, but she tries to suppress this tremor, striving for control over her body. No, this can't be happening. Her worst fears have come true. How wrong she was to think she could handle everything. Now the whole world has collapsed for her. Knowing that nothing will ever be the same again, she'll have to face the challenge that life has thrown at her and move forward, overcoming difficulties and pain. Winter. This year turned out to be cold and snowy. The car slowly approaches the hospital, maneuvering through difficult stretches of road. The driver, carrying his wife and young child, must be cautious. Their son cries incessantly throughout the journey, dampening the mood of his parents. Tensions rise between the husband and wife. "Melvin, couldn't you wait for us? We have Tommy's follow-up appointment. We won't be long. Just half an hour. Tops," the wife says, irritation evident in her voice. "Stacy, I've already told you I've only been granted an hour off. We have a new boss. I can't afford to look like a slacker," he responds, nearly raising his voice. "But you have to understand, it'll be really hard for me to get home with Tommy in my arms. He's so heavy and he keeps crying. He doesn't need the extra stress." "Fine, I'll quickly submit my report and come after you, but you'll have to wait for me a bit," Melvin concedes, suppressing his frustration, his love for his son evident. "Don't forget to ask for tomorrow off. We have to go back to the hospital again for more tests," Stacy reminds him. I remember. We're all set," Melvin says. The car stops right in front of the hospital entrance. Melvin walks them to the building's entrance, bids them farewell, and hurries back to his car. He knows he's running late. Nevertheless, he decides to pick up some fares on the way. Every cent counts now. Melvin works part-time as a taxi driver, a job that has become essential for their family budget. But this time, it's not just about extra income. It's a lifeline amid their financial worries. They're forced to take this step because their little one is facing an illness that requires not only medical intervention, but also significant financial expenses. Melvin quickly drops off his passenger and rushes to his main job at the laboratory. It's a small private lab where they conduct quality checks for their clients' products. The work is straightforward, and he enjoys the distraction it provides from everyday problems. But his salary isn't very high. He's still late for the meeting. As he enters the laboratory, he sees his colleagues, Leonard and Sally, already at work. "Good morning," Melvin greets as he enters the office. "Good morning, you're late today," Leonard remarks. "Leonard, have you heard anything about the bonus for meeting the targets?" Melvin asks, his concern evident. They need the money now. "Do you really think they'd tell us about it?" Leonard replies with a smirk. And Melvin, did you know the new boss was looking for you? Sally chimes in. Really? Then I'll go to him right away. I'll hand him the report and ask about the bonus, Melvin says, winking at his colleagues. By the way, where's my report? Here it is, Ketch, Leonard begins, waving it in front of him. Thanks, buddy. Melvin playfully snatches the papers from him and heads off. Stacy and her son Tommy sit in the doctor's office, while Samantha, the nurse, attentively listens to their conversation as she fills out the young patient's chart. The doctor addresses Stacy with a question that troubles her. Well, what can I tell you? How old were you when you gave birth? The doctor asks. 33, Stacy responds, her voice trembling slightly as she tries to remain calm. The doctor looks at her sympathetically. Yes, when giving birth at that age, there's a chance the child may have complications. Unfortunately, that's what happened with your little one. Doctor, I want my child to be healthy, Stacy responds tearfully. Of course. You need to undergo tests, get an ECG and echo, but it's a paid service. Are you okay with that? The doctor says. Yes, of course. Stacy agrees, knowing that her son's health is worth any effort and sacrifice. Samantha, the nurse, who has heard everything, feels a pang of sympathy for the boy and his mother. At that moment, she decides to speak to Stacy. I'm sorry, Stacy, but Tommy's situation is indeed serious. Samantha begins. Free examinations are only given to families with multiple children, but there's a long waiting list. You might not make it. Yes, and you also need to take the child to a pediatric cardiologist. But unfortunately, we don't have one at our clinic. You'll need to go to another hospital, but even there, the pediatric cardiologist is a paid service. Would you like us to write a referral for you? The pediatrician adds. Yes, of course, yes, Stacy agrees, her voice filled with worry. Now Stacy breathes a sigh of relief. She just needs to pick up all the documents at the reception and finally head home. Her little one is tired and hungry, in need of rest. However, as soon as Stacy approaches the reception, she sees a huge line of people. Apparently, she'll have to spend another hour here, but she simply couldn't afford it. Her little one was already whining and starting to cry. She decides to take a desperate step and cut in line. Excuse me, can I go first? I just need to pick up some documents and get a stamp? Stacy asks with pleading eyes. A woman with curly hair and a clearly displeased expression returns to her. Girl, where do you think you're going without waiting in line? Do you know how long I've been standing here waiting? She says. Please let me through, I'm in a real hurry, Stacy says, almost in tears, feeling the tension rising. Whispers begin to circulate around them. She's got some nerve, someone whispers. Who does she think she is? Another person remarks. Well, okay, I'm sorry, I understand, Stacy gives in, defeated. Samantha, finding herself nearby once again, observed the scene. She deeply loved children and couldn't just let it go. After standing for a few seconds, Samantha approached them and said, Let me help you. She quickly found the necessary documents, stamped them, and smiled warmly. Everything will be all right, Samantha said. Thank you so much, Stacy replied, heading towards the hospital exit. Suddenly, Samantha's phone rang. She stepped aside to answer the call. It was her boyfriend, Nick. Hey, I missed you. Are we seeing each other today? Samantha said, smiling gently. Listen, there's something I need to tell you. I have to go on a business trip. No, you don't need to come, he said, then paused for a few seconds. Listen, I've decided that it's time for us to break up. His words struck Samantha to the core. Her head spun and the world seemed to stop. She tried to compose herself and said, Nick, how? You promised me. Unexpectedly for herself, Samantha raised her voice. It's because of you that I won't be able to have children now. You're despicable. I'm coming over right now, and we're going to talk. Wait for me. She shook with anger. Her rage and desperation intensified as memories surfaced of how this same guy became the reason for her decision to have an abortion. Samantha didn't even suspect that he already had a new girlfriend. Samantha quickly threw on her coat, leaving it unbuttoned and not bothering to remove her work uniform, and rushed out of the hospital, heading to her boyfriend's apartment. Her heart pounded so hard it felt like it wanted to escape her chest. Thoughts and plans swirled in her head. She decided to confront her beloved and finally get all the answers. Arriving at his home, Samantha went up to the floor where her boyfriend lived. She rang the doorbell, but no one answered. She rang again and again, then began knocking on the door. It was futile. No one was home. He hadn't waited for her. After crying at the door for some time, she decided to go back home after all. The meeting with the new boss went smoothly. They quickly found common ground, and yes, Melvin's hopes for the bonus were realized. He was thrilled and decided to share the joyful news with his wife, Stacy. He dialed her number, and when she picked up the phone, exclaimed enthusiastically, "Stacy, you can rejoice. Yes, I got the bonus. Now we have the money for those procedures. I'm coming for you. I'll be there soon." Melvin, invigorated and in high spirits after hearing about the bonus, rushed out of work, got into his car, and headed for his wife and child. As usual, on the way, he decided to pick up a taxi fare to earn some extra money. Melvin was in a hurry, so he pressed hard on the gas pedal, and suddenly he was pulled over by a police officer. He carefully pulled over to the side of the road, and as soon as the officer approached, Melvin said, "Officer, I'm in a big hurry," Melvin tried to explain. "License and registration, please," demanded the officer. "I swear I'm in a rush," Melvin repeated. "Everyone's in a rush," the officer scoffed. Melvin knew his wife and son were waiting for him, so he tried to find a way out of the situation. "Sorry, I'm really running late. There's just no time. My wife and son are waiting for me at the hospital." "Well, maybe you could give me a ticket. I'll pay." "A ticket? Speeding could lead to license suspension for you." The officer raised his eyebrows. "We'll be issuing a citation now," the officer said decisively. Meanwhile, Stacy and Tommy were waiting for Melvin outside the hospital. Tommy was crying profusely, and Stacy tried to calm him down, but to no avail. Suddenly, the phone rang. It was Melvin. Stacy immediately answered the call. "Hello? What? How did they detain you?" "Why, Melvin? Speeding? That means license suspension. You have to give the entire bonus to the cop." "Bravo. And you don't care about our child's health?" "Don't bother coming for us. We'll manage on our own. Thanks for your concern, dear." She hung up, cursed under her breath, but pulled herself together and headed towards the bus stop. By evening, Melvin had finally sorted things out with the police officer and hurried home to his family. On the way, he stopped by a toy store and bought a large toy truck for his son. "Hi, sweetheart," Melvin greeted as he walked in. Stacy was in the kitchen chopping vegetables for dinner. She didn't greet him warmly and didn't say anything in response. So he approached her and tried to kiss her, but she recoiled. Melvin realized his wife was very angry with him for not meeting them with their son at the hospital and for giving away all of his bonus as a bribe to the police officer to avoid losing his parental rights. Then he just kissed his son, who was sitting in his high chair at the table, and gave him the toy. Immediately, Stacy rushed over and said, "Don't touch the child with your dirty hands." She took the child and carried him to the bedroom. He decided not to upset his wife and immediately went to the bathroom to wash his hands. He took off his wedding ring and placed it on the sink to wash his fingers more thoroughly. However, deeply lost in his thoughts, Melvin forgot to put it back on. Samantha returned home, sat down at the kitchen table, and spent several hours lost in her thoughts. She tried calling her boyfriend all evening, but he never answered her calls. She was filled with anger and disappointment. Why was she so unlucky in her personal life? And things weren't smooth at home either. Samantha still lived with her parents, and their relationship was strained, especially with her father. He never understood her, or perhaps didn't want to, and they constantly argued. Feeling desperate, she decided to take extreme measures, go back to her boyfriend's house, and wait for his return right outside his door. She must talk to him no matter what and convince him not to break up. She loves him so much. She began putting on her coat and headed for the door when her father suddenly arrived. "Where are you going, huh? It's late," her father asked. "It's none of your business where I'm going," Samantha said sharply, her voice sounding tense. "You're talking to your father like that? I said you're not going anywhere," her father shouted. "It's not up to you to decide where I go or don't go. I'm an adult and responsible for myself." Samantha raised her voice too. Her father suddenly grabbed her by the sleeve and started pulling her away from the door. Samantha resisted. Her mother rushed in at the sound of the commotion and began to calm everyone down. "Jorge, stop! Stop, Jorge, let her go!" Her mother intervened. Samantha broke free from her father's grasp and ran outside. "Don't bother coming back home," her father yelled after her. The door slammed shut with a loud noise. At that moment, Stacy was washing dishes in the kitchen. She loved cleanliness, so she washed each plate very thoroughly, and it also calmed her down. Overall, their house was always perfectly clean, everything in its place. If something was out of order, it irritated Stacy. Lately, she had become overly sensitive, but she couldn't help it. At this moment, Melvin approached Stacy, feeling the need to apologize to his wife. "Sorry, I really didn't see that cop," he said, trying to explain. "Step away, my hands are wet," Stacy replied, her voice sounding cold. She was very angry with him. "Well, if I hadn't given him money, we'd have been without a car for half a year," Melvin continued, trying to justify himself. "And now we're without procedures for our child, consultations with a cardiologist. Do you think that's a fair trade?" Stacy asked indignantly. "And please, let's not start. You know I'll earn that money. I can make as much in one night driving a taxi," Melvin said. "I don't want you working nights. I don't know who you're picking up there," she continued, irritated. "Samantha, do you think I'm doing this for myself? I'm doing this for us, for our family, for our home," Melvin replied, trying to justify himself. "For the home? Do you even understand what it's like for me? How I live? Endless hospitals, subsidized meals, stores, pharmacies," Stacy almost shouted, her voice trembling with emotion. "You know, I don't exactly lounge around at work either. Instead of coming home just to relax, I hear your constant discontent. Don't touch this, don't dare. Tommy's asleep, Tommy this, Tommy that," Melvin retorted, starting to get angry. Stacy stopped washing the dishes, turned off the water, and looked her husband straight in the eyes. "Come home and relax? Have you done anything for the home?" "Here we go again," Melvin said, grabbing his head. "You live like you're in a hotel. You can't even wash a dish after yourself. Look," Stacy pointed to the sink. "It's leaking. I've been telling you for 3 years to fix it, but it keeps dripping and dripping," Stacy exclaimed, her voice full of desperation. "Don't shout," Melvin objected, trying to drown her out. "It's dripping and dripping," Stacy continued to raise her voice. "Don't shout, you'll wake Tommy," Melvin repeated, now in a whisper. "It's dripping," Stacy shouted. She was at the edge of her emotions. At that moment, Tommy woke up and cried loudly. "You see, you've woken Tommy again," Stacy said calmly now. "Go wherever you want. You don't have to come home at all." Melvin looked at his wife with disappointment for a few seconds, then turned around and left, slamming the door of the apartment loudly. The argument was over, but both felt that something was just beginning to unravel in their relationship. Stacy held her head, feeling a headache creeping in. Helplessness and despair reflected in her eyes. Meanwhile, Tommy continued to cry, his childish wails filling the apartment like a bitter melody of unresolved issues. Meanwhile, the faucet continued its monotonous dripping, as if adding to the atmosphere of tension. Meanwhile, Melvin exited the building and, like a robot, headed towards his car. The car became his refuge from worries and troubles. He didn't plan on going back home tonight. He needed somewhere to crash. He definitely wouldn't sleep in the car. Winter nights were too cold for that. He remembered that his friend was renting out an apartment in the city, so he decided to ask if he could crash there for a couple of days. He had nothing else to do. Melvin took out his phone and called him. "Hey Miguel, how's it going?" he said, trying to inject a note of cheer into his voice, though inside he felt hollow. "Hey buddy," his friend replied. "Listen, have you rented out your apartment yet? I need a place to crash for a couple of days." "What happened? Did the wife kick you out?" his friend joked, then realized he might have gone too far. "Sorry, man." "Don't ask. Lately, Samantha and I have been struggling to see eye to eye. You know, stress because of Tommy," Melvin replied. "I'm really sorry, buddy. Of course, you can stay there. Come over to my place. I'll give you the keys. I'll text you the address." "Thanks. Thanks a lot. I'll swing by. Thanks." Melvin started the engine and headed to his friend's place for the keys. As always, he decided to pick up a client on the way. He enjoyed working as a taxi driver, loved cruising around the city, It cleared his mind and calmed him down. And now, too, he immersed himself in his thoughts, trying to figure out what was happening in his life and how he could fix the situation. Samantha was already at her boyfriend Nick's house when she saw his car approaching. Her heart raced so fiercely it felt like it might leap out of her chest. She was ready to do anything to sort things out and return everything to how it was. As the car drew nearer, she realized someone else was in it, a long-haired blonde with pink lip gloss. The sight stunned her. Was it all over? The car pulled up and Nick stepped out, looking angry. Samantha couldn't believe it. They loved each other. How could everything change so quickly? Now he looked at her like a stranger. I already explained everything to you. Why did you come? Nick said angrily. Nick, please don't treat me like this, Samantha pleaded. Why should I even talk to you? I don't love you, sorry, Nick replied dryly. So, when I got pregnant and had an abortion, you loved me. But now you don't? Samantha started to get angry. Don't start. When was that? 4 years ago? Nick retorted. But for me, time stood still. Nick, you have no right to treat me like this. Samantha was almost in tears. I'm sorry, it's over between us. I love another woman, he said. He looked her straight in the eyes, indifference written all over his face. Nick turned away and headed towards his car where his new girlfriend sat. He wanted to get out of here as soon as possible. Blood was boiling inside Samantha, hatred consuming her. How could her dearest person treat her like this? She lost control. Samantha ran after him and started hitting him with her purse. She wanted to hurt him so badly. I'm begging you, don't treat me like this, she yelled and continued to strike him with her bag. He turned around, rolling his eyes. Her blows were hardly noticeable to him. He was a tall man. Nevertheless, her behavior infuriated him, and he snatched her purse away, tossed it aside, and aggressively shoved her with a strong blow, causing her to fall to the ground. Luckily, at that moment, Melvin happened to be passing by. He saw the scene, and his sense of justice didn't allow him to just drive past. He abruptly stopped his car and rushed out towards Nick. Hey, what are you doing? Melvin exclaimed as he approached him. What, man, you're defending this crazy chick? Nick said. Yeah, I'm defending her, Melvin replied firmly. What, this psycho? Have you lost your mind? She's nuts, Nick retorted. Yeah, her, Melvin said, intending to punch Nick. Okay, I get it. Let's part ways peacefully. Take her. She's yours, Nick said, turning around, walking to his car, and quickly driving away. Samantha lay on the ground, just staring at them. Tears streamed continuously from her eyes. When her ex-boyfriend drove away, she let out a piercing scream that echoed down the street, crying even harder. It was over. She was alone now. There were no thoughts in her head. The loud roar of anger and hurt drowned her consciousness, so she cried for several more minutes. When Samantha calmed down a bit, Melvin helped her up. He felt really sorry for the girl. He wanted to help her. He had to do something. He noticed her bag lying nearby, picked it up, and dusted it off. Here, take your bag, get up, let's go, I'll take you. Where do you want to go? He asked. She didn't answer, just looked at him with a distant gaze. All right, let's go, I'll take you home, said Melvin. Samantha nodded, still not fully present. He took her hand and led her to the car. She silently followed him. When they got in, Melvin started the engine, and they drove off. Just drove straight, without a destination. There was silence in the car. Only the faint hum of the engine disturbed the peace of the night. As they sped through the streets, Melvin didn't break the silence, knowing that Samantha needed a moment of calm and understanding. Samantha stared out the window, lost in her thoughts, while Melvin silently accompanied her on this difficult journey. On the way, Melvin noticed that there wasn't much fuel left in his car, so he decided to stop at a gas station. He thought it would be a good idea. There was a cafe at the gas station where he could suggest Samantha grab a snack and some coffee. Maybe it would help restore her emotional state a bit. Pulling into the station, he warmly looked at her and said, Come on, there's a cafe here, you need your strength. Refusal is not accepted. Okay, you're right, she finally said after a long silence. They entered the cafe and ordered coffee, just coffee. They didn't feel like eating. They just wanted to warm themselves and their souls with the drink. Here's your coffee, Melvin handed her a cup of hot beverage. "Thanks," Samantha replied. "How much sugar do you take?" she asked. "2 spoons, please." Samantha put 2 spoons of sugar in his coffee and stirred, looking at him mysteriously. Melvin smiled. "So, have you decided where to take you?" he asked. "Nowhere is needed. I can manage on my own, thanks. The subway still runs. I'll go to my grandmother's. She's always happy to see me." "Are you out of your mind? Taking the subway at night? It's dangerous here. You know what, since I kinda saved you, let's go with me. I have an idea." "Where to?" "You'll see. You can trust me. Finish your coffee, grab your bag, and let's go." Samantha looked at him attentively. Yes, she wanted to believe him, and she did. "Well, okay," she smiled, and they walked back to the car. What was Melvin's idea? He decided to take Samantha to his friend's apartment, where he intended to stay himself. He realized she had nowhere else to go, and she needed solitude and support. Something touched him about her. He wanted to make her happy. As they got into the car without explaining anything, silently turning the wheel, he headed towards his friend's house to finally get the keys. Quickly grabbing the keys, they drove together to his friend's apartment with Samantha. They arrived swiftly. Melvin opened the door, letting Samantha go in first. The apartment was small, almost unfurnished, with only an inflatable mattress in the room and a bunch of bottles, as if a party had just taken place here. Melvin and Samantha exchanged glances. There was nothing else to do. This was the only place to stay for the night. Melvin began to inflate the air mattress for Samantha, while she walked around the room and looked into the closet, from where she took out a blanket and a pillow. "You'll stay here for the night, and we'll see what happens next, okay? I know it's not ideal, but it's all we have. I'll visit you tomorrow. When you wake up, send me a message, and I'll bring you some groceries, all right?" Melvin said. "Yes, of course, thank you so much. I'm really grateful to you. By the way, my name is Samantha," she said. "Nice to meet you, I'm Melvin." "Melvin, thank you so much for everything," Samantha said, feeling warmth inside. Melvin looked at her, smiled, and said goodbye, heading to his beloved family. Samantha stayed in the apartment. She sat on her inflatable mattress and smiled. She thought about Melvin and his heroic act. Something was budding in her heart, but she didn't quite understand what it was. The night fell, but the warmth remained in her heart, thanks to the kind gesture of this man. Melvin eventually returned home. It was late at night, everyone was already asleep, and he didn't bother joining his wife in bed. Tired and worn out, he headed to the kitchen. His wife, Stacy, had been awake all night waiting for Melvin to return. Yes, she had told him not to come home anymore, but she didn't mean it. She was just angry. She heard him enter the apartment but didn't go to greet him. Instead, she lay in bed, waiting for him to come into the room. When he didn't come for a long time, Stacy couldn't resist and went to him. She found him in the kitchen. The light was on, and he was sleeping with his head on the table. With a heavy sigh, Stacy turned off the light and went back to the bedroom. In the morning, Stacy decided to make a peace-offering breakfast. She brewed coffee and made pancakes. Their little son was chirping nearby, and it seemed like harmony was returning to their home. The whole family sat down to breakfast. "I'm sorry. Please forgive me for overreacting yesterday," Stacy said, pouring him coffee and adding a spoonful of sugar. "It's okay, everything's fine," he replied, taking the coffee. Melvin added another spoonful of sugar to his coffee, sighed, and began to stir the drink, lost in thought. Suddenly, his phone chimed. Melvin took it out of his pocket, read the message, and smiled. It said, "Good morning. I'm awake and waiting for you." "Who's texting you so early?" Stacy asked. "Oh, just some spam. Anyway, I've got to go," he said. Melvin stood up, approached his son, and kissed him on the forehead. Ignoring his wife, he turned and headed for the door. "Melvin!" Stacy called after him. "What?" He turned back. "You forgot to wear your ring," she reminded him, extending it to him. "Oh, right, of course, thanks," Melvin said, taking the ring from his wife and leaving. He couldn't wait to see Samantha again. Stacy watched him go. She felt like she was losing her husband and blamed herself for it. Melvin arrived at Samantha's place, and she opened the door. Samantha had wet hair and was wrapped in a pink towel. He understood she had just come out of the shower. As he walked further into the apartment, he was pleasantly surprised. Cleanliness and order prevailed around, and there was also the aroma of freshly brewed coffee in the apartment. Melvin looked at her with such admiring eyes, as if she were extraordinarily beautiful, a magical girl, unlike his perpetually angry and dissatisfied wife. "Hey," he said. "Hi, coffee?" she asked, smiling with her kind and gentle smile. "Yes, please," he replied, feeling warmth in his heart. "2 spoons of sugar, I remember. Drink up while I get dressed," she said, her voice sounding soft and refined, like music to his ears. Melvin was particularly pleased to notice that Samantha remembered how many spoons of sugar he preferred in his coffee. This gesture of tender care and attention made his heart beat faster. In her attentiveness and care, he saw something unique and beautiful that made him feel special and important. Samantha noticed how he looked at her, and it seemed like she was starting to fall in love. They had coffee together and breakfast. Of course, Melvin offered to give Samantha a ride to work. She didn't refuse. As they approached her workplace, he was amazed. It turned out to be the same hospital where his wife takes their little son for doctor's appointments. What a coincidence, he thought back then. Before getting out of the car, she looked at him with a tender gaze and quietly asked, "Will we see each other again?" "I'll call you. And do you work here?" he asked. "Yes, I work here. I'm a nurse. Well, bye. I'm already running late." She smiled softly and got out of the car. He smiled after her. Following his routine, he picked up another client and drove them to their destination. Approaching the hospital doors, Samantha encountered Stacy with Tommy. Stacy was pushing him in a stroller, and Tommy was giggling happily. Samantha remembered them. It was nice to see Stacy again. Smiling warmly, Samantha caught up to Stacy. "Stacy, hi," Samantha greeted. "Hello," Stacy replied, joy evident in her voice. "Are you about to take some tests?" Samantha inquired. "Yes," Stacy confirmed. "Do you want me to let you skip the line? You'll get everything done quickly and can go home." "Tommy will feel better," Samantha suggested with a smile. "Yes, thank you. We woke up so early today, I think he's already sleepy." Stacy replied, gratefully smiling. "Let's hurry then, Stacy," Samantha suggested. Thank you so much." Stacy thanked Samantha and they headed into the hospital together. As Melvin drove, his thoughts were filled with Samantha. She was so lovely and caring. How warm it felt to have her around. He hadn't felt such emotions in a long time, missed someone caring for him, looking at him with those eyes. What was happening to him? What had this girl done to him? Melvin dropped off another client. He ran up to the girl, kissed her, and they entered the cinema. Cinema, he thought. Maybe it's a sign. He decided to call Samantha. His heart beat a little faster than usual as he dialed her number.
"Samantha, hey, do you want to go to the movies with me tonight?" I offered, hoping for a positive response.
"Hi, Melvin. I was just thinking about you. Of course, let's do it," she replied. "Great, then I'll pick you up after work. Wait for me." Hearing Samantha's agreement, Melvin felt a surge of happiness. He was already looking forward to the evening spent together. This girl occupied all his thoughts. She inspired him. He wanted to be with her all the time. The time until the evening seemed to drag on for him, so he finished his work early and went to pick up Samantha. He waited for her in the car for a while, and finally, she came out and slowly approached his car. He quickly got out and opened the door for her. "Hi, I'm glad to see you. Ready to go to the movies?" Melvin asked. "Hi. Yes, I'm ready. Is the movie going to be interesting?" she flirtatiously asked. "You'll see," he winked at her, and there they sat in the darkened theater hall. It seemed like they weren't watching the movie at all. Their minds were constantly on each other. Melvin took Samantha's hand in his own and squeezed it as if trying to convey his feelings through her skin. Samantha felt the warmth of his palm and the cozy protection it offered, enveloping her like a soft blanket. With each touch from Melvin, she delved deeper and deeper into the atmosphere of love, as if in a magical whirlwind carrying her into a new, uncharted future. The movie session gave them both unforgettable impressions, but not about the movie itself, rather about each other. And they exited the building, slowly making their way to his car. Melvin and Samantha looked at each other, and in each other's eyes they saw happiness. They realized they were in love, and it was mutual. With a smile on his face, Melvin opened the car door for Samantha. "Well, shall I take you home?" he offered, looking at her. "Let's." Samantha nodded. They got into the car and Melvin said, "Get something from the glove compartment." Samantha opened the compartment and found a small but very cute bouquet of flowers inside. She couldn't hide her excitement and happiness, and embracing him, she kissed Melvin. "Melvin, Melvin, how beautiful." Thank you," she exclaimed, feeling genuine excitement from such an unexpected and sweet gesture. A smile played on Melvin's face as he saw the joy in Samantha's eyes. It was so rewarding for him to make her happy, to see her smile and the sparkle in her eyes. He was also happy to bring her joy, knowing that this moment would be special for both of them. Melvin escorted Samantha to her apartment. He hesitated for a while, but then gathered his courage and kissed Samantha on the cheek before leaving. "Good night," he said, his voice warm and caring. "Good night," she replied, a happy smile playing on her lips. In her heart, there was a feeling of gratitude for meeting Melvin, and she couldn't think of anything else but him. Meanwhile, Stacy quietly mourned in their family apartment, waiting for Melvin. When did things go wrong? They were so happy, so in love with each other. And now they felt like strangers. No, she loved him. They were just going through a rough patch. Stacy hoped that Melvin loved her too. It's just how life goes sometimes. They just needed to talk, figure things out, and mend their relationship. She decided to recall happier times by playing the cassette from the maternity ward when their son Tommy was born. Those seemed like the happiest days of their lives, and now they seemed irretrievable. Stacy cried, longing for those times. Melvin returned home late again, and this time Stacy was already asleep. He quietly lay down next to her and drifted off to sleep too. The next day, Melvin woke up early. He didn't want to cross paths with his wife, so he quickly left for work. Happy after last night with Samantha, Melvin rode the elevator to his office when suddenly his colleague Sally entered. "Hi, Melvin," she greeted him. "Press the 8th floor, please. Melvin, are you there?" "Oh, sorry, just lost in thought," he said. Sally immediately noticed the sparkle in his eyes and teasingly asked, "You've been quite absent-minded lately. Are you in love? Who is she?" "Oh, stop it," he said, trying to shut down the conversation. "Do I know her? Is she young? If your wife finds out, she'll make a scene," she mocked. "She won't find out," Melvin confidently replied, although deep down he wasn't so sure anymore. Samantha also arrived at work, and her colleague, with whom she got along very well, noticed that Samantha seemed unusually happy. It was clear she had someone in her life. "Is this guy good this time?" her colleague decided to ask directly. "He's the best. There's no one else like him," Samantha replied, smiling. "All right, hurry up and put on your uniform. You're running late. I'll cover for you," her colleague said. "Thanks," Samantha replied, smiling, and hurried to change clothes. Throughout the day, Samantha worked with a smile on her face. Her energy was contagious. Colleagues noticed her good mood and were happy for her. But Melvin still occupied her thoughts, his gallantry, kindness, and attention to her. When the workday came to an end, Samantha eagerly awaited her meeting with Melvin. She looked forward to an evening full of his attention, and that evening arrived. She grabbed her bag and headed towards the hospital exit. In her chest, hope warmed her that the evening would go wonderfully, and she would get to know Melvin better. Stepping outside, Samantha caught a fresh breeze, which seemed to her like a harbinger of happy changes. Melvin was waiting for Samantha outside her workplace. When she exited the building, he smiled and approached her. "Hi, Samantha," he said joyfully. "You look beautiful today." "Hi, Melvin," she replied with a smile, feeling her heart beat faster at the sight of him. "So do you." "Shall we take a walk by the waterfront?" "That would be lovely." They walked for a long time, laughing, sharing their stories and experiences. It seemed like they had known each other for 100 years. "My father left the family when I was just 5. I learned to drive when I was a teenager. My uncle taught me on his old car. I graduated from college, then unsuccessfully tried my own business. It failed. Then I started working at the laboratory, and well, at night I work as a taxi driver. That's my story, Melvin shared. I practically don't have a home. When I was still in school, I tried to come home later after classes. And then I lived in the dormitory of the medical university, Samantha recounted, recalling her past. But why? Melvin inquired, listening attentively. My father drinks. Well, I'm used to it, she replied, shaking her head as if warding off painful memories. Samantha, why don't you want to move out from your parents' place if it's so hard for you? He asked, sensing the importance of this question. I just have nowhere to go, she said, lowering her gaze. Listen, if you want, you can stay with my friend permanently, Melvin suggested. Can I? Samantha looked at him hopefully. Yes, I'll arrange it. Let's go get your things, Melvin said, smiling at her. He drove her to her parents' place so she could retrieve her belongings. She was so overjoyed to finally be moving out that she quickly rushed upstairs to gather her things. Samantha felt the anticipation of a new life without her parents. Her mother entered the room, looking worriedly at her daughter. Oh, Samantha, where are you going? Stay, we'll fix everything, her mother asked. Samantha deeply loved her mother. She always supported her. Even after their argument, she didn't hold a grudge against her mother. But Samantha couldn't stay here any longer. It was time for a change. Don't worry, Mom, everything is fine. I'm grown up and ready to live on my own. Okay, I have to go now. They're waiting for me downstairs. I'll tell you everything later, Samantha assured her, hurrying to leave. Well, my girl, but I'm still very worried, her mother replied. It's okay, I'll stay with a friend, that's all, Samantha said. She grabbed her bag of belongings and was already standing at the door when her father stepped into the hallway. He looked angry and swayed slightly. Probably already had a drink, Samantha thought. Mother, don't let her go. Let her stay home. This is her home, her father intervened, shouting. Suddenly, anger engulfed Samantha. She turned to her father and started yelling directly at him. Home? Is this even a home? Mom, do we have a warm and cozy home here? Samantha gestured with her hands and forcefully kicked an empty bottle of alcohol that was on the floor. Then, swinging the door wide open, she ran downstairs. Bye, Mom! She shouted as she descended. Melvin met Samantha at the entrance. He took the heavy bag from her hands, and they walked together to the car, driving to the apartment where Samantha would now permanently live. At that time, Stacy was feeding Tommy before bedtime, eagerly awaiting her beloved husband's return. However, time passed, and he still wasn't back. She started to worry. Eventually, unable to wait any longer, she decided to call him herself. Melvin's phone rang. He quickly retrieved it and answered. I'm driving, can't talk right now, I'll be there soon, he said dryly and promptly hung up, tucking the phone back into his pocket. It was only now that he realized Samantha had no idea he had a family and a child. He was deceiving his wife and betraying their marriage. Yes, things hadn't been smooth between them lately, but she was still his wife, and he loved her. What should he do now? Are you in a hurry? Samantha asked, bringing his thoughts back to her. Her question brought him back to the present. I just promised to help a friend, that's why he called, he explained. Oh, I see, Samantha replied. Let me drop you off at your apartment, okay? I'll go myself. It's getting late, he said, somewhat distant. As you wish. Samantha smiled, though something troubled her deep down. They had only driven a short distance when Melvin's car stalled in the middle of the road. An unexpected breakdown disrupted their plans, forcing them to pull over to the side. What's happening? Oh no, this can't be. Melvin sighed and got out of the car. Confidently, he approached and lifted the hood to inspect the engine, intending to fix the breakdown, while Samantha watched from inside the car. I can't believe it. What kind of day is this? Samantha exclaimed. Melvin tinkered under the hood for about an hour, trying to fix things. He was all dirty, and the situation was starting to frustrate him. He connected the last wire in place and returned to the car to try starting it. Come on, start, please, come on, he said hopefully. After 3 attempts, his car finally started. Phew, finally started, Melvin said, sighing with relief. Samantha, who had been watching him the whole time, burst into laughter. Why are you laughing? Because I'm all dirty, he asked, looking at Samantha while making a face. She laughed even louder. I just feel good with you. So, "What do I do now?" Melvin asked. "You? Let's go to my place. You'll take a shower and I'll clean your jeans, okay? Let's go. Get in. Come on," Samantha said. Melvin simply agreed. In an instant, he forgot about his promise to his wife that he would be home soon. They went up to the apartment and started taking off their outerwear. "Wait," Samantha said. "Don't touch anything, I'll help you." Samantha began to remove Melvin's dirty shirt, looking him straight in the eyes. He couldn't take his eyes off her either. Her fingers lightly brushed against his skin, and she felt the warmth of his body. Suddenly there was something more fiery in their gaze than just sympathy. Melvin gave in to the impulse and kissed her. Their lips met as if an invisible magnet was pulling them together. Samantha felt her heart beating faster, and each touch from Melvin sent thrilling shivers down her spine. And then, without words, they found themselves in each other's arms, with the whole world seemingly freezing around them, leaving only the two of them in that moment. Excitement and passion made them forget everything else. They simply savored the moment as if they had found a long-awaited refuge from the everyday worries. Dirty hands and clothes suddenly ceased to matter, and everything just happened. While Melvin was with Samantha, his wife, with sadness in her eyes, hummed a quiet lullaby, putting Tommy to bed. "Where is Melvin?" she asked herself. In her heart, there was hope that Melvin would soon return home to share this difficult day with her. Hope and worry mingled in her heart, as she had hoped to see him at home on time. Meanwhile, Melvin was consumed by Samantha. For him, the only thing that mattered was this instantaneous spark that had ignited between them. He forgot about his obligations and completely lost track of time, immersing himself in the world of his emotions and passions. Suddenly, the phone rang. Melvin picked up the phone and saw Stacy displayed on the screen. He declined the call. "Who was calling you?" Samantha asked. "I need to go, Samantha," Melvin replied tensely. "No, wait. I'm not letting you go anywhere. Today, all the chores can wait. Do you hear me? I'm not letting you go," Samantha said, kissing him again. Their passion flared up with renewed intensity as they embraced again and began to kiss passionately. Nothing else mattered. They were immersed in the world of their own feelings, forgetting about the outside world and time until their passion gave way to blissful silence. Melvin never came home that night. Melvin returned early in the morning when Stacy and Tommy were already awake and had breakfast. Their gazes met, and Stacy immediately sensed that something was wrong. Melvin tried to justify his absence the previous night. "Imagine, it was a crazy night. I was busy with clients all night and made good money." His words sounded somewhat absurd. She stood up silently, took her son in her arms, and began to walk to another room when her gaze fell on Melvin's hand. Again, there was no ring on his ring finger. She desperately tried to hide her anxious thoughts, but inside here, a storm of emotions raged. Every time she saw the absence of the ring on Melvin's finger, her heart clenched in a tight knot of worry and incomprehension. Melvin noticed her emotions. Now he was left alone in the kitchen. Breakfast, which Stacy had lovingly prepared for him, was on the table. After all, she loved him, regardless. And the faucet, as usual, was dripping incessantly. Something clicked in his mind. He rolled up his sleeves and decided to tackle a long-standing task, fixing this faucet that had been dripping for 3 years. This faucet had become a symbol of unfinished business in their family life. To his surprise and satisfaction, he handled the task better than expected. The drops finally stopped, and silence reigned in the kitchen. A sudden cry from Stacy in the other room pierced the silence and made Melvin jump. His heart beat faster and thoughts raced through his mind, trying to understand what could have happened. He instantly rushed towards the sound, tension and anxiety filling every cell of his being. Melvin, hurry!" Stacy called out to him excitedly. "What happened?" Melvin rushed to her, the tension still lingering. "Tommy started walking," she exclaimed joyfully. Melvin looked at his son. He stood on his little legs, taking cautious steps. Melvin quickly grabbed the camera and began to film what was happening. The boy walked carefully, stumbled a little, and fell. But he didn't cry. He laughed cheerfully. "Tommy, come to us, Tommy," Melvin said, capturing his son on camera. Tommy took 2 steps, and in Melvin's heart a new warm feeling emerged. What happiness it was to be here now. He never suspected he could be so happy. He promised himself that he would never let this feeling fade away, and he would do anything to protect those who evoke this feeling in him, his wife, and little son. "I love you so much," Melvin exclaimed ecstatically, smiling happily. At that moment, his phone rang and Samantha's number appeared on the screen. This time, he indifferently ignored the call. "Who was calling?" Stacy asked, not understanding why Melvin didn't pick up the phone. "It's from work. I'll call back later," he replied, continuing to enjoy the happy moment. Meanwhile, Samantha listened to the ringing, waiting for Melvin to finally pick up the phone. The sound of the ringing didn't stop and increasingly irritated her, as if the room was filling with that sound. Her heart beat furiously, worrying about what could have happened to make Melvin not answer the phone. In Melvin's mind, something shifted in an instant. He realized that he had made a huge mistake by starting a relationship with Samantha. It was like some kind of obsession, as if she had enchanted him. But now he thought clearly and understood that there was nothing more important in the world than his family. Melvin firmly decided to meet Samantha to end their relationship. He arranged to meet her and was already waiting for her in the car near her workplace. "Hey," she said joyfully as she got into the car. She tried to kiss him, but he recoiled. Samantha seemed not to notice and was in a great mood. "Hello, Samantha. I need to talk to you," he said seriously. "I need to talk to you too, Melvin," she smiled. "Let's go to a place." "Where?" he asked. "Not far from here. I'll show you. Let's go. You'll like it, I promise." "All right," he agreed for some reason. They arrived at a tall building still under construction. Samantha took Melvin's hand and led him there to the top floor. There was an apartment still under construction, a huge living room with columns, high ceilings, and a huge balcony with an incredible view of the entire city. Samantha ran around the room and spoke excitedly. "So, do you like it? Let me show you the view from the window." She grabbed his hand and led him to the balcony. "Samantha," he said, but she didn't pay attention. "Look how beautiful. You know, I really want us to have an apartment like this," she exclaimed. "Samantha," he said again, but she seemed not to hear him. "No, maybe not exactly like this and maybe in some other place, but I want it to have the same beautiful view. And you know, I also want our apartment to be as beautiful, cozy, and warm. You know, I've never had such an apartment in my life, and I've never felt so good, and here we'll have flowers, right? Melvin, you want that too, don't you?" Samantha stood on the railing of the still unglazed window, gripping it with her hands, and stared into the distance. "Look at the view," she said admiringly. Melvin couldn't stand Samantha anymore. He realized it was time to tell the truth. "Step away from the balcony, please," he said irritably. "I won't until you admit you want this too," she playfully replied, ignoring his tone. "Step back, I'm telling you," Melvin suddenly yelled. "What?" Samantha snapped out of it, looking at him bewilderedly. "I'm married. My child is almost a year old," he finally confessed. It was like a bolt from the blue for Samantha. Everything suddenly went dark before her eyes. She simply couldn't believe it. Excitement made her pace back and forth, as if trying to escape from this terrible truth. "Married, but you're a grown man, oh my God. Why didn't you tell me this earlier?" she exclaimed. "Because you never asked," he replied. Samantha smirked. It sounded funny to her ears. "Yeah, I didn't ask," she said. "Understand, Samantha, we can't be together because I will never abandon my child," Melvin stated. "Do you have a picture of him?" she oddly asked. Melvin took out his wallet, retrieved Tommy's photo, and showed it to her. Samantha saw the image of the little boy, her heart squeezed with mixed emotions. "He's a beautiful boy," Samantha managed to say. She bolted and ran away. In tears, she rushed home to her parents, her heart torn with pain. She ran to the medicine cabinet and hysterically began grabbing various pills. With trembling hands, she was about to start taking them all. She didn't want to live without Melvin. His revelation was too devastating for her soul. Suddenly, her mother burst into the room and saw what her daughter was about to do. "Samantha, my goodness, what are you doing?" Her mother snatched the pills from her hands and began to calm her down. Samantha cried out in anguish. "He's married. He has a child. He will never be with me. Never." "Mom, do you understand? Never," Samantha screamed. "Sweetheart, you're still so young, you'll find the right man," her mother began to console her. "Mom, I'm 24. I'm almost an old maid. I'm a barren old maid," Samantha cried bitterly, each tear a scream of her pain. "All right, what's done is done. It can't be undone. Please calm down a bit. Infertility is not a death sentence. You can adopt a child, love, and raise them." "With whom? With whom should I love and raise them? I want to get married, but nobody wants to be with me," Samantha sobbed. "Samantha, honey, it's not him right now. Don't give up. If you like someone, pursue them. You're good and attractive. Look at yourself. You're the most beautiful to me." Her mother hugged her lovingly, as if trying to hold her close to her heart to impart her strength and support. The next day, Samantha was back at work. The day's hustle and bustle consumed her, and during one of the patient appointments, Stacy entered the doctor's office with Tommy. Suddenly, Samantha recognized him. All the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. The boy in the photograph was Melvin's son. This unexpected encounter left her with a fire of mixed emotions in her heart, and she didn't know what to do next. However, a plan had already formed in her mind, a cunning plan. Samantha smiled sweetly at Stacy, trying to conceal her true feelings. "Hello?" greeted Stacy.
"Hello,"
the doctor replied. "Doctor, we've raised the necessary amount for the examination and are ready to go to the clinic tomorrow," Stacy said confidently. "That's wonderful," the doctor rejoiced. "Samantha, issue a referral to the cardiology center for Tommy," the doctor instructed Samantha. "Of course, I'll do it right away," she responded. "Can I have your passport details and your husband's details for the referral to the cardiology center?" Samantha asked Stacy. "I have them, but they're at home. Maybe I'll bring them later. Literally in half an hour, you'll have everything," Stacy said. "Listen, why run back and forth with the child? If you agree, I can come with you. I'll get ready now, and we'll go to your place for the necessary documents," Samantha suggested with a smile. "What a great idea. Thank you. I'll wait for you," Stacy agreed, thinking they had already become friends with Samantha since she had helped them several times before. Gathering themselves, Samantha and Stacy slowly made their way toward Stacy's home. But Samantha had no intention of helping. While pretending to support Stacy, resentment boiled in her heart for Melvin's betrayal, hiding his marital status. With each step, she confidently formulated her plans, striving to regain Melvin's attention, at least a part of it. Samantha tried to appear sweet and friendly, despite her hidden revenge plans. They conversed along the way. "My husband and I waited so long for Tommy's birth that when he was born, life, at least for me, took a back seat," Stacy shared. "And your relationship with your husband cooled off, didn't it?" Samantha inquired. "Well, to some extent, yes. I guess it's my fault. You know, sometimes you get so tired, not even enough energy to undress, let alone." Stacy trailed off, embarrassed. "I understand," Samantha replied thoughtfully. "Let's go to the pharmacy. I need to buy something," Stacy suggested as they approached. Stacy parked the stroller at the entrance, carefully placed it against the wall, and started to enter the pharmacy. Samantha looked concernedly at the stroller left with sleeping Tommy outside the pharmacy. "Are you leaving Tommy here alone?" she asked, puzzled. Waving her hand, Stacy replied, "He's asleep. We'll be quick. There are many people there, all kinds of infections. Come on, he won't wake up." "As you want," Samantha acquiesced. After returning from the pharmacy, Stacy arrived home, and Melvin came back home in a good mood. As he stepped in, shedding his jacket, he cheerfully said, "Hey honey, why aren't you greeting your husband?" He headed to the kitchen, but as he walked in, he froze. There, sitting at the table next to his wife, was Samantha, the same Samantha with whom he had spent evenings in bed and briefly felt happy. Melvin was stunned. What was she doing here, he wondered. His thoughts were in turmoil, but he composed himself and tried to remain calm. "Meet my husband, Melvin," Stacy said, smiling. "And this is my friend Samantha. We met her at the hospital. She helped us a lot." "Hello," Melvin uttered, pretending they weren't acquainted. An awkward silence hung in the air. Samantha triumphed inside. He was in her hands, and she could shatter his life right now. She could tell his wife everything, and they would surely divorce. And Melvin would be hers. But suddenly she changed her mind. Listen, I'll head home, all right? She said to Stacy. It's too late, dear. Melvin, could you drive Samantha home? Stacy asked Samantha. Melvin, could you take Samantha home? Trying to suppress his emotions, Melvin replied, Yes, of course. Samantha said goodbye to her new friend, and she and Melvin left the apartment, leaving Stacy alone with her son. Melvin hurried to the car, and Samantha ran after him, trying to justify herself. Melvin, please, just listen to me. Melvin, I've thought about everything. Even if you have a wife and child, can I please see you occasionally? Please. Let's get in the car, he replied gruffly. Without a word, they got into the car and headed towards Samantha's home. Only the noise of the road surrounded them. Melvin seethed with anger and frustration in his thoughts. Why did fate ever bring him and Samantha together? Why? After a few minutes of silence, the quiet was broken. Why did you come? Did you say anything to Stacy? He asked just as roughly. Nothing, I love you, she replied. Her words simply ignited a firestorm inside him, not of joy, but of intense anger. I've already explained everything to you. I won't leave my family. What more do you want? He began shouting. I understand everything. I'm not asking that of you, she calmly replied. You're not asking? That's great. We're going to the apartment now. You pack your things and leave, and I'll wait for you in the car. Samantha couldn't understand anything. He was kicking her out of the apartment he himself offered. It couldn't be true. She loved him. He had saved her then. He was her knight. No, she would fight for her happiness and achieve it at any cost. She knew that for sure. Melvin drove, and Samantha quietly went up to the apartment, while he patiently waited by the car on the street until she gathered her things and brought him the keys. But that didn't happen. The scene that followed was shocking for Melvin. He was utterly stunned and terrified. His heart stopped when he heard Samantha's scream. She was standing on the balcony on the 12th floor, shouting, Melvin! Melvin, look here! Melvin! If you leave, I'll jump. Do you hear? Melvin, come back to me. I'm begging you. Melvin! Samantha pleaded. Samantha's words echoed in the air like a desperate cry for help. She was frightened, broken, and her voice sounded frantic. Melvin instantly rushed towards her, bewildered and terrified by his own helplessness. He dashed into the open door of the apartment, panting. He saw her trembling, standing on the edge. Melvin rushed to her, not thinking about the consequences. Samantha, no, don't do this, he shouted, approaching her. His voice was piercing and full of desperation. Please don't do this. I'm here. Come down, Samantha. Come down. Samantha was trembling and crying. She was having a panic attack. Samantha, listen to me, he said, his voice trembling with emotion. I didn't intend to leave you. Do you hear? I didn't intend to. We can work everything out. Please come down from the balcony. We'll find a way together, I promise. Finally, Samantha obeyed him, stepped away from where she stood, and spoke. Melvin, please don't leave me. I can't live without you. Her voice was filled with despair. Melvin, I can't live without you. Melvin held Samantha close, as if trying to shield her from all the troubles and fears of this world. He felt her body shaking with tension and worry, and his heart ached with compassion for her pain. Everything will be okay, Samantha, he whispered, stroking her hair. I'm here with you. We'll get through this together. Don't be afraid. I won't leave you. Samantha clung to him even tighter, as if trying to seek refuge under his protection from all the storms of life. In his embrace, she found a little comfort and hope for the future, and despite all the difficulties, they were together. The stress of what they had just experienced strangely turned into desire. Like fire, passion flared up between them, igniting with each touch and kiss. In each other's arms, they forgot everything except their feelings. Melvin felt his heart beating in unison with Samantha's, and her every breath filled him with a longing for her closeness. Samantha surrendered to this passion recklessly, as if diving into an ocean of emotions. Her body burned with desire, and her breath was uneven and passionate, reflecting the inner fire that blazed in her chest. Every moment spent with Melvin seemed precious to her, and she was willing to endure any trials just to be with him. His love and care were like a ray of light in the darkness, filling her life with joy and meaning. It's late already, Melvin. whispered Samantha as they lay embraced. "Your wife will worry. It's time for you to go. You have an early departure to the airport, and I'll wait for you." Her voice sounded firm, though her heart ached with parting. She was ready to share him with his wife as long as he remained in her life. And without saying a word, he left. The night turned into morning, but Samantha still felt the weight of the previous evening. Melvin had left yesterday, and she knew she wouldn't see him again until his return from Israel. Instead of justifying it to herself, she made a decision. Despite the pain and disappointment, she would wait for him. The next morning, Stacy, Melvin, and their son Tommy flew to Israel and finally went to the clinic where Tommy would undergo a full examination and finally be treated. They had waited for this moment for so long. Stacy spent several hours at the clinic with her son, while Melvin paced around the building, anxiously waiting for the results. Suddenly, Stacy ran out of the clinic building. "Melvin," she shouted, approaching her husband. "What's the matter?" Melvin asked, concerned. "The diagnosis didn't confirm. Tommy is healthy." "Healthy?" exclaimed Stacy with joy and relief. "I love you," Melvin replied, kissing her. Melvin and Stacy were simply overwhelmed with joy and happiness when they learned that their son was healthy. They couldn't hide their excitement. Smiles lit up their faces as if they had the whole world at their feet. Joy sparkled in their eyes, and they embraced as if it were the most significant victory of their lives. It was the moment when all their worries and anxieties dissolved, and they felt that everything would be all right. Melvin, Stacy, and their son returned home late in the evening. Melvin entered the apartment first, carrying Tommy in his arms. To his surprise, the lights in the apartment were on. Suddenly, Samantha emerged from the kitchen. "Hi," Samantha said, greeting them with a smile. "I've been waiting for you." Melvin didn't expect to see her here. How did she get here? He asked, "What are you doing here?" Stacy followed and said, "I asked Samantha to feed the cat while we were away." "I've prepared dinner for you. Come to the kitchen," Samantha added, opening the door to the kitchen. Stacy entered the kitchen, deeply touched by her friend's care. "Thank you, but why did you bother? Maybe you'll have dinner with us," Stacy asked, caring. "I can't, I'm in a hurry, I need to go." Samantha quickly gathered her things. "Samantha, thank you," Melvin said, restraining his emotions. She turned to him, looked into his eyes, and smiled affectionately. Then she glanced at little Tommy. "Goodbye, little one," she said, smiling at the boy. "Bye-bye," the little one cheerfully shouted. "I'll walk you out, it's late," Melvin said to Samantha. "Okay." They stepped out of the apartment again, Melvin guiding her back to the temporary place Samantha was staying. On the way, silence enveloped them, each lost in their own thoughts. Entering the apartment, Samantha warmly imagined that Melvin might stay with her for the night. She envisioned how they would spend this evening together, immersed in the realm of their feelings and passions. Samantha's heart fluttered with anticipation, convinced that this evening would be unforgettable for both of them. "I missed you," Samantha said tenderly. Melvin sighed heavily. Irritation flared up in his soul again. He cursed her. He cursed himself. "Why do you meddle in my family?" he snapped. "I want to be with you," she pleaded. "No, I'm telling you for the last time, don't interfere with me and my family. Leave us alone," he replied firmly. "I love you and want to be with you," she repeated, refusing to back down. "I have a wife and child, I'll never abandon them, understand?" he emphasized. He turned to leave. What if he wasn't there? She grabbed his elbow. "What do you mean, wasn't there?" Melvin asked incredulously. "If your son wasn't there?"
His eyes widened. A surge of anger pierced Melvin.
"What nonsense are you talking, fool?" he exclaimed. He stared into her eyes intensely. He couldn't bear this anymore. "Anyway, do as you please. If you want to jump out the window, I don't care. Just leave the keys with the neighbor, okay?" And without waiting for her response, he left the apartment, leaving her standing alone with shattered hopes. Her mad love had driven her insane. Samantha wouldn't let him go just like that. The next day, Stacy went for a walk with little Tommy in his stroller, as usual, and they also stopped by the pharmacy. This time, she left the stroller with Tommy at the entrance to the pharmacy, intending to quickly buy what she needed and return. She had no idea that this habit of hers could be used against her. As soon as Stacy entered the pharmacy and the door closed behind her, filled with anger and a desire to get back at Melvin, Samantha swiftly approached the stroller where little Tommy sat. Silently and quickly, she lifted him out of the stroller and fled away, seeking to disappear into the crowd on the street. Samantha carried little Tommy away in an unknown direction. Upon returning from the pharmacy, Stacy discovered the empty stroller, and her heart froze with horror. She began to call out her son's name, panic seizing her thoughts. Tommy was nowhere to be found. Fear and desperation ignited in her heart. Stacy, overwhelmed with despair and fear, couldn't withstand the onslaught of terror and helplessness. Her legs gave way, and she fell onto the cold asphalt. With trembling hands, she took out her phone from her bag and called her husband, Melvin. Her voice quivered as she informed him of the tragic news that their little son, Tommy, had been abducted. "Stacy, go to the police. Do you hear me? I'm on my way, Stacy. Calm down, I'm coming," he yelled into the phone, his words bursting out of him full of desperation. Melvin dashed out of work without explaining anything, jumped into his car, and sped off to the police station. His heart pounded so hard it felt like it might burst out of his chest. When he arrived, Stacy was already there. She rushed to him, embracing him tightly as if it was the only thing that could keep her from falling into the abyss of fear and helplessness. "Melvin, Melvin, they've taken our boy!" Stacy cried out, her voice trembling with fear and sorrow. Melvin silently held her, feeling her body shaking with sobs. His own heart ached with pain and worry, but he suppressed his emotions, trying to be strong and supportive for Stacy. "Stacy, calm down, we'll find him. We won't stop until we bring our boy back," he said, his voice firm. "Perhaps you suspect someone?" the police officer asked. Suddenly, Samantha's words echoed in Melvin's mind. "What if he wasn't there? If your son wasn't there?" His head spun with thoughts, and fear made his heart beat faster. God, he understood everything now. Stacy rested her head on his shoulder, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Melvin, what are we going to do?" she whispered. "We'll find him, Stacy, and we won't stop until we bring him home," he replied. Samantha and little Tommy were already on the train, speeding away into the distance, carrying them into the unknown. At that moment, she couldn't think about the consequences. Her only thought was how to hurt Melvin, and she had succeeded. Samantha held little Tommy tightly in her arms, his crying piercing her heart. She knew she had acted horribly, but now there was no turning back. She looked at the baby, his eyes filled with fear and confusion. She tried to reassure him, speaking soothing words, but her voice trembled with excitement and guilt. Melvin decided to search for Samantha himself. First, he went to her workplace. When he arrived, anxiety overwhelmed him. Deep down, he hoped it was all a misunderstanding. He approached the nurse's station. "Where's Samantha, the nurse with black hair?" asked Melvin, his voice tense. "Samantha," the girl at the reception desk inquired. "Yes, where is she?" Melvin was almost shouting. "She's not here today, she's off," the girl replied. Melvin was filled with anger. Where could she be? Of course, her parents. He was sure she was there with Tommy. Arriving at her parents' house, he hurried up the stairs and knocked forcefully on the door. Anger and worry pulsed in his chest as he waited for a response. The door opened, revealing Samantha's drunken father. Melvin was already at the edge of his emotions. His voice sounded threatening and insistent as he spoke. "Where's Samantha? Where is she? I know she's here." His eyes expressed rage and determination as he pushed the man aside and entered the apartment. "Samantha!" He went through all the rooms, turning everything upside down in his path. "What business is it of yours where she is? Who are you anyway?" Samantha's father replied, swaying slightly on his feet. Melvin, feeling both rage and desperation, grabbed Samantha's father by the collar. The man was bewildered and scared. "Where is she? Where is she?" he repeated fiercely. "If she's not at work, she must have gone to her grandmother's out of town," Samantha's father replied in a trembling voice. "Address, give me the address." "Craneford Street, number 27. Melvin let him go and hurriedly left. Now he would definitely find his son and take him away from the clutches of this madness. Melvin got into his car and raced to the address at breakneck speed. He felt fear, but he had only one goal: to save Tommy. Stacy was already back home. She still couldn't grasp what had happened. She was sorting through Tommy's things, crying. At that moment, the phone rang. Stacy slowly picked up the receiver. "Hello?" A police officer's voice came from the other end of the line. "Stacy Clark?" "Yes, it's me. My name is Mr. Clyde. We've found a child matching the description of your son. You need to come in for identification." Stacy dropped the phone. She didn't even want to entertain the thought that it could be her own child. Mechanically, like a robot, Stacy got dressed and went downstairs to go for identification. Unexpectedly, Samantha was standing near the entrance as if nothing had happened. Stacy was relieved to see her. "Samantha, I'm so glad you're here. Please help me, I beg you, I'm so scared. Please help me," Stacy pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "What happened?" Samantha asked, bewildered. "You have to help me with identification, I just can't bear it," Stacy said between sobs. "What identification?" "Tommy is missing," Stacy said, breaking down once again. Samantha hadn't expected things to take such a serious turn. Of course, she agreed to go with her. Samantha and Stacy entered the dimly lit morgue room. There was only one source of light, a bright lamp over the metal table. It stood right in the middle, and beneath it lay a small body covered with a sheet. It was very cold. The police officer led them to this table. Stacy was overcome with grief. Samantha couldn't understand what she was feeling. "Are you ready?" the policeman asked. "I can't look, Samantha. Please, you look," Stacy said, burying her face in Samantha's shoulder. The policeman lifted the sheet. "Is this him?" "It's not him," Samantha replied coldly. Leaving the morgue, Stacy, feeling slightly relieved, snapped back to reality and remembered that she hadn't informed her husband about this. She called Melvin, hoping to bring some relief to their agonizing wait. "Hello, Melvin. We were at the morgue. It's not him. Do you hear me?" Stacy said, her voice trembling. "What? At the morgue? Who's with you?" Melvin, alarmed by the news, tried to make sense of the situation. "They told me the police found a child's body, but it's not our son. We're here with Samantha." "With Samantha? Where is she?" he asked again. "We're with Samantha, Melvin," Stacy replied. Caught off guard, Melvin lost control of the car and crashed into a large truck on the road, heading straight towards him. "Hello, Melvin, hello, hello," Stacy repeated, hearing a strange noise. It's strange, he didn't hang up, but he's not saying anything. "Hello, hello." "Melvin." A stranger's voice came from the other end of the line. "Who are you? Where's my husband?" The voice delivered the tragic news. Her husband had been in a serious accident. Stacy's heart froze with horror. Samantha looked at her with a questioning gaze. "An accident? Melvin?" Stacy could barely squeeze the words out and fainted. "Stacy, what accident?" Samantha asked. "Stacy, Stacy." Samantha, feeling anxious and frightened, hurried to her grandmother's house where she had left little Tommy. Her heart was beating faster than usual, and thoughts were swirling in her head, creating chaos. She was bewildered and couldn't understand how she ended up in such a situation and what to do now. Realizing that taking Tommy was a wrong deed, she decided to return him to his parents. She understood that it was the only right decision in this situation. Despite her own feelings and desires, she knew that the baby belonged with his family and she shouldn't interfere in their relationships. She approached the door of the apartment where Stacy lived with Melvin. Samantha left Tommy next to the door, briefly pressed the doorbell, and ran away. Stacy heard the bell and came out of the apartment. She saw her son on the doorstep. She hugged him, feeling tears of joy streaming down her cheeks. At that moment, she realized how much she had missed him and how grateful she was that he was back with her. Tommy, not fully understanding the gravity of the situation, simply hugged his mom and smiled. It was a moment of happiness and reunion that Stacy would never forget. "Tommy, my beloved Tommy, my dear, my good," Stacy whispered affectionately. Melvin miraculously survived, but sustained multiple fractures and serious injuries in the accident. After a long and arduous period in the hospital, Melvin slowly but surely began to recover. With Stacy's unwavering support and the diligent care of the doctors, he managed to get back on his feet. The family had been through a lot, but their bond became stronger than ever. On the other hand, Samantha, realizing her mistakes, decided to change her life. She embarked on a journey of redemption and gradually discovered that true happiness lies in honesty and kindness. Thus, despite all the trials, each of the characters found something valuable. Melvin and Stacy, reconnection and a strong family bond, while Samantha found a new path to redemption and genuine happiness. And so ended their story, filled with a whirlwind of emotions, but ultimately leading to true growth and